Thank you. Good evening, everyone, and thank you all for attending this meeting of the Council. I also welcome any members of the public who may be viewing this meeting remotely. Before we begin, I want to address some housekeeping measures to make this meeting run as smoothly as possible. I shall ask the Principal Democratic Services Officer to read a brief statement. Neil?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to clarify that the Council summons and reports for the meeting are available on the Council's website via the committee information pages. The Mayor will introduce each item on the agenda and will call speakers one by one. Please press the red speak button on the microphone in front of you should you wish to speak on an item, and the Mayor shall call you in. If you are using your own device, please ensure that your camera and microphone are turned off, as they are not required. When matters are put to the vote, the Mayor shall ask for a show of hands unless a named vote is requested. In attendance to support this meeting with any technical advice, the Council's Chief Executive, Dr. Helen Patterson, Executive Directors, the Council's Monitoring Officer, Tony Cox, together with Mr. Principal Democratic Services Officers.
Thank you. Before I move on, can I just wish you all a very, well, let's put it this way, a much kinder year, I hope we have. It hasn't been very good last year and the last couple of years. I just hope we have a kinder year this year, get on with what we need to do. So welcome and thank you for being here. Item agenda, apologies. I have apologies from Councillors Murphy, Jevons and Ghazali. Are there any further apologies for tonight's meeting?
Yes, Chair. I've got Councillor Paul Bott, Councillor Chris Bott, Councillor Aid Nazir and Councillor Naheed Kultasib.
And I think Councillor from Willenhall, what's his name? The other councillor from Willenhall. Creaney, yes, have you read? Is he here? Because he said, I read on Facebook he couldn't make it. Sorry. My apologies for that. Sorry. Right. Can we now proceed to item 3 on the agenda and to approve as a correct record and sign the minutes of the meeting of the Council held on the 8th of November and extraordinary meeting held on the 17th of November. I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of November 2021 and 17th of November 2021, copies having been sent to each member of the Council, can be approved as a correct record. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Bird. All those in favour, please show. Any to the contrary? It's clear that the majority is in favour, so I declare that the minutes are approved. Now move on to item 4, declarations of interest. Have members got any declarations of interest relevant to the meeting this evening?
Just declaration of interest on item 13.
Right, that be noted. I'll now move on to item 5, local government tax information. As there are no items to be considered in private session, I shall move on to item 6. Item 6, Mayor's announcements. I would like to confirm that the item relating to the nomination of Mayor / Deputy Mayor-elect for 2022-23, which is usually considered at the first meeting of each calendar year, shall be considered at the next meeting of the Council to be held on the 24th of February 2022. I'm informed by the leader of the Conservative group that it is the intention to move the following at the said meeting: Councillor Martin for Mayor-elect and Councillor Toe for Deputy Mayor-elect. And now it is with sadness that I refer to the death of the former Councillor John Whiston, a member of Walsall Metropolitan Borough Council from 1980 to 1987, and place on record their appreciation of his services to the borough over a period of many years, and expresses its condolences to his family at this sad time. Do any members wish to speak in tribute to former Councillor John Whiston? Got any? Sorry, can't see anybody. Where's it gone? Councillor Smith.
Thank you. John Whiston sadly died in the early hours of the 2nd of January following a heart attack. I've known John for almost 50 years, firstly when I was a young or youngish member of the Labour Party. John had a brief spell as a well, not all that brief. He was a councillor from 1980 to 1987, representing firstly the Willenhall North Ward and then the Willenhall South Ward. And he was secretary of the Walsall North Labour Party for many years. And it's only in the last 3 or 4 years that he actually decided to let his membership of the party lapse. However, despite the fact that many of his friends and acquaintances parted company with the Labour Party in the mid to late 90s, we all remain friends. Up until only a few weeks ago, I often joined John and a few other friends for a pint on a Monday evening, and a good and stimulating political discussion was always assured when John was around. John was a magistrate for a time, and for some years he was manager of the Willenhall Lock Museum. But John's greatest passion was cricket and his association with the Wednesbury Cricket Club, where he was the secretary for many years. He was a keen player and later served as a qualified umpire, as well as mentoring children in cricket. John, who lived in Beeley's Lane, Bloxwich, leaves a wife, Christine, and 2 sons, Vaughan and Neil, and he will sadly be missed by all those who knew him.
And I call upon Councillor Bird. You got your light on?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, it always worries me because when somebody passes away, it's only me and probably Pete who remembers them because they've been off the council for so long. But I knew John. Obviously, he was a very quiet individual, and I'm sure that he won't mind me saying, because he was always one to having a bit of a joke, that it was interesting that Pete said he let his Labour Party membership lapse. So he obviously saw the light before he left us. But John was a great guy. He was always very amenable. He was a good contributor to the debate and very level-headed and very reasonable in the comments that he made. I think he sat on the Land and Property Committee with 1 or 2 of our people. But yeah, John was, although a short space in many terms, 7 years, but he was a great individual, a lovely person, and I'm very grateful to have worked with him over the years we did. Pete knew him far better than I did, and he was around when we had those troublesome times in the early 80s, but I wish his family well, and it's very sad to see his passing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bird. Councillor Aftab-Nawaz.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to pass on our group's condolences to his family and his friends, and remember him in our prayers and our thoughts. Thank you.
And Councillor, it's gone off. No other speak. My apologies. Right. I move that this council have heard with deep regret of the death of former Councillor John Whiston, a member of Walsall Metropolitan Borough Council from 1980 to 1987, and place on record their appreciation of his services to the borough over a period of many years and expresses its condolences to his family at this sad time. I now call upon members and officers to stand in silence as a mark of respect and ask the clerk to confirm when a minute has elapsed. Now move on to item 7 to receive any petitions. Do any members have any petitions they would like to submit?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I've got one on behalf of Willinghall North Ward, please.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I'll move on to agenda item 8. There are no questions from the public or elected members, so we move on to item 9. Recommendation of Audit Committee, appointment of external auditors. I call upon Councillor Bird to move the recommendation of Audit Committee.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I move the recommendation set out as item 9 on the agenda as set out, please? Seconded.
Do any members wish to speak to the motion? There isn't any. Then thank you, members. All those in favour, please show. Any to the contrary? That's carried. Now move over to agenda item 10A, recommendation of Cabinet relating to Treasury matter. And I call upon Councillor Bird to move the recommendation of Cabinet. Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will formally move the item 10A on the agenda because each of the items listed there on A, B and C do, should they wish to have a separate debate on those. So I'll formally move 10A as set out. Seconded.
Thank you, members. All those in favour, please show. Any to the contrary? It's clear that that is carried. Thank you, and I declare the recommendation is carried. Thank you. Now we're on agenda item 10B, recommendation of Cabinet relating to the local council tax reduction scheme. And I call again upon Councillor Bird to move the recommendation of Cabinet.
Item 10B, as set out on there, is changes to the local council tax reduction scheme, which is self-explanatory, as I understand. Certainly my.
Do any members wish to speak? Yes. Yes. Thank you. Councillor Kizza Hussain first.
Thank you. Thank you. My question is, obviously, this is a scheme that's going to be changed. On page 38, 4.3, my question to leader is, this scheme is based on household income and size. This will generate some winners and losers. My question is, who will be the winners and who will be the losers? And how will we be compensating the losers and helping and supporting them? I know there's a report attached to say that there'll be a special fund to compensate the people especially the vulnerable people. So I want to know who the loser will be and how we'll be communicating to them that it's going to affect them and how we'll be supporting them. Thank you.
And the other speaker, Councillor Smith.
Actually, following on from what Councillor Hussain just said, when this report went to Cabinet in September, I'm not a member of the Cabinet, obviously, but one of the first things I did when I read it was ring up, I don't know whether I rang up now or sent an email, I certainly didn't meet them face to face, contacted the council to ask that very question about winners and losers. And apparently, it's not all that simple at this stage to actually see who the winners are and who the losers are. But for example, in the Blakeney ward, there's something like 1,481 people, that's in the Blakeney ward, 1,481 people that will be affected. And from the figures I've obtained, through a bit of work, is that 1,020 people will be a winner. And being a winner could mean, and I'm not sure whether this is per week or per month, I think it's per week, could be a winner between £0 and £10 or even more. 45 people will see no change, and 416 people will be losers. And again, they could be losers from £0 to £10 plus, although most of them in the smaller amount rather than the larger amount. When I asked the question about this, I was told that some losers may be cases where current data show them. I'm sorry, let me just start that bit again. When I asked about winners and losers, apart from obtaining those figures for Blakeney, I was told that those who are on high universal credit due to family size are possible candidates for being losers. And also that some losers may be cases where current data shows them as nil income. So non-dependent adults who are presently down as nil income could well be reviewed and find that they'll be a loser in the sense that they'll have to pay or pay more. But beyond that, I think it's difficult to tell at this stage. The report that's attached to this is about 132 pages long, and I quite wonder whether everyone in this room has read every little bit of that. I admit that I haven't. I've glanced across it, but I haven't read it in detail. But I think there is a point that Councillor Hussain's making, and that is that when the time comes in April, when these changes take place, I think councillors are likely to get calls, not from those who are winners, but possibly from those who are losers. And it's at that point, I think, when councillors need to know, if they don't already know, what they do when they get those calls, who they refer them to, and what help is available if the call suggests or reveals a particular hardship case. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Bird.
Seven clearly shows this is cost neutral. So if anybody thinks this is a cost saving exercise, it is not. And to answer Councillor Hussain's question, the winners and losers are clearly indicated on the table on page 44, which may be, of course, coming back to the comment that Councillor Smith has made, that perhaps not everybody in the room has read the report. But it clearly shows the winners and the losers on page 44, and this has to be debated by the full council, at which point in time things may become a little bit clearer, or members may have the time to read the 100-odd pages of the report. It is fair to say that this is a scheme which obviously affects every council in the country. Some councils have been harsher than us in recent years, but we have tried our very best to support the individuals who find it difficult to pay the full council tax for reasons which are set out in part of the report, And as a result, we come up with a calculation, as I say, the main table of which is on page 44, which lists the winners and the losers, if you like, the gainers and those who don't gain. It's not easy, it never is. But when you're trying to run a council with reducing resources, everything has to be looked at. This is cost neutral. But of course, at the end of the day, what we are trying to do is to give these people the best possible support that this council is able to. And therefore, as I say, you will look at, I think, mostly £10,748,720, which is 12,296 households who are seen to be gainers. So might I say to people, if you haven't had time to read all the report, the main body of it is on page 44.
Thank you. I now proceed to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Any to the contrary? That is carried. I now move over to agenda item 10C, recommendation of Cabinet relating to food law enforcement plan. Once again, Councillor Bird, to move the recommendation of Cabinet, please.
I'll move the report as set out, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Gary Perry.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And in seconding the recommendations as set out, I want to say a few words in relation to this report, particularly first of all to thank our staff, because for the large part of the last 2 years, predominantly staff within regulatory services have supported the COVID response effort, which to some extent has pushed staff away from their normal duties into other areas of operations. And when you think that for the large part of 2020 into early 2021, large parts of the economy was closed down anyway, particularly certain food establishments and so forth, it did mean that we had a very much of a scaled down service operating this food safety law. What I do want to say is this, that the report is in two parts. For the large part, it sets out the recovery position that we need to be in place by the end of next year. We've got the added pressure now in terms of the emphasis on allergen control, really important, because some people will understand that for some individuals, food allergies can actually lead to death if the correct food labelling and so forth is not in place. Food safety law covers more than just hygiene compliance. It's preparation, labelling, contamination, composition, and also food fraud. And the service operate, as I said, exceptionally well. You know I have a passion, Madam Mayor, for scores on the doors, and it's very disappointing to know that as yet we still haven't adopted that as a mandatory requirement when Northern Ireland and Wales have. I understand from the Food Standard Agency it's still in their plans to do so, but equally I guess they are thinking of the economic effects of doing that. However, in a time when we are living with COVID and we are protecting ourselves and others, not just through hands, face, space and fresh air, it's sad to think that when we are talking about food establishments, things that can make you ill, that we're still having to go and inspect on a regular basis, particularly those who fall into that category of 0 to 3 in terms of their hygiene rating. There are some positives in this report, that at the moment we are standing at around 84% of all rated premises in terms of food establishment, which is above both the regional and national average. So it shows our push to actually get our food establishments in Walsall to a decent standard. I want us to go further. And as we move into the 91% plus range of food establishment rated 3 and above, what we want to be doing is getting that elite range where establishments, once you hit 5, are re-inspected on an annual basis. And if you get 5, 3 years on a trot, you are classed as an elite food establishment. So the importance of food hygiene can never be underestimated. We know of cases where people have E. coli, salmonella, and can end up in hospital as a result of that. You will see on page 32 the prosecution and enforcement actions that the service has undertaken. It is a reduced level of prosecutions, but again, that's the impact and reality of the pandemic. But I so move this report because I think, given the constraints on the service, it's very positive and shows since 2018 particularly, we've moved significantly from the low 80s to food compliance to the low 90s now. Of course, I want us to be 100%. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Councillor Ian Robertson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would add my support to the idea that we should be lobbying to ensure that food hygiene rating is displayed at the front door entrances, as in Wales and in Northern Ireland, but not in England. I think it is essential that we keep lobbying for that. I would have nothing but praise for the officers who managed to do so much under very challenging conditions. But if we become just reactive, of course, there may well be areas that get missed, such as passing off chicken when it's supposed to be lamb. And I wonder how long it will be before there will be full restoration of this important service. And I wonder how the priority list is going to be decided, because you're going to have to decide who is a priority to get inspected. Thank you.
Councillor Diane Coughlin.
Councillor Perry just mentioned the scores on the doors and that the food agency hadn't yet adopted it. It is a really good initiative, and I think the three, and you're an exceptional business, why can't we as a council adopt it?
Councillor Bird, have you got any replies to make? I'm asking Councillor Bird to reply to the points made. Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have to say that the efforts that Councillor Perry has put in to try and get this on the door, so to speak, like it is in Northern Ireland and Wales, is and should be commended. Every time I see headlines in the Express and Star that we've closed down a food establishment because of bad hygiene, you would think I'd think, oh dear me, not another bad story. That is not. That's one of the good stories, because it shows how diligent our officers are and give confidence to the people who are running clean establishments and are making sure that people's health is not at risk by the food they sell. So the message from this meeting is quite clear. We will find you, and in actual fact, we'll make you clean up your act. If not, we will close you down. And I think that's commendable to everybody who works in this. And I think every one of us in this room, to a man and woman, should be grateful that our health and our children's health is not at risk. During the pandemic, more and more people were using food stores to get stuff delivered because they couldn't get out. So here's an example of where we should be lobbying government and where this council can, in actual fact, write to ministers to ask them to put this in the legislative procedure of this country to make sure that those are on the door, so you know when you get to the front door that the people inside are serving wholesome food that's not being run over by rats and everything else, and the ideas of what we found in some of the establishments. So I commend Councillor Perry and all of the people involved in that team. Thank you.
And I put that to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Any to the contrary? Thank you. That's carried. Move on to item 11. And it's portfolio holder briefings, deputy leader and regeneration, Councillor Andrew, and then adult social care, Councillor Pedley. I'll call on Councillor Andrew first. Councillor Andrew.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm sure everybody has read the quite comprehensive report that you have in front of you, so I will just pull out a few key things from the report. There's been a lot of achievements over the last 12 months or more, and one that we're particularly proud of is the Rough Sleeper initiative that has housed 16 individuals through the government's Everyone In project. The other thing that we're incredibly proud of is the Housing First initiative, where we have housed over 101 former rough sleepers in the borough, and some of the people with the most complex and vulnerable individuals who would usually be excluded from housing options. And for those of you who are not aware of Housing First essentially starts with a tenancy, and the support regime is put in place for these individuals and as a bespoke regime for each individual rather than a tick boxing exercise. It's been incredibly useful, incredibly successful for these individuals. In terms of looking after vulnerable people as well, officers have secured through home energy and insulation assistance over £7 million of external funding and submitted bids for nearly £10 million to come into this borough to help people and to help us tackle fuel poverty across the borough. Our revenue support team have received 3 national awards, including Revenue Team of the Year. Our rough sleeping numbers now, 2016, we're at 26, and now are at a level 3, which I think is an incredible achievement for this council. We've supported over 14,000 businesses during the COVID pandemic to a tune of nearly £80 million. On the regeneration side, we've had some great successes and continue to have great successes with investment continuing to come into the borough. We were incredibly active in resolving the Ravenscourt issue and bringing Aldi on board with to tackle that site. The Civic Square in Brown Hills has been delivered, and I'd like to just remind people that when we took control of this council, that was allocated as a housing site and not a site for the Civic Square. We've got success with the Willenhall and Darlaston railway stations, with Willenhall on site, and in the town centre we have over £11 million from the Future High Streets Fund and £42 million for both, well, for Bloxbridge and for Walsall through the Towns Fund. Now that is a lot of money coming from the government in order for us to regenerate our town. Work has started on Phoenix 10, a huge derelict site in need of remediation, which will provide up to 1,000 local jobs. And we've been given news today that the demolition of Sadler's Quay will be starting on the 12th of January, and that will be a new housing scheme in the middle of the town centre, again tackling derelict buildings across this borough. The Willenhall Master Plan is a key plank of our policy to tackle the derelict buildings and the derelict sites in Willenhall and to bring those back into economic use, either through housing or for employment sites. And that master plan will end up as a supplementary planning document, which will help us with compulsory purchase of some of those sites, because we have so many unwilling landowners and sellers in that part of the world. Junction 10 is progressing incredibly well. We have a fantastic partnership with Highways England and with the contractor. And overall, we are moving forward. And it's time, and I've said this before, time to talk up our town, our borough, and actually the opportunities that are here for people to actually get. We are investing a lot of money. We're bringing in a lot of private sector support in order to look after our residents and give them a better future in the borough of Walsall. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrew. Councillor Ian Robertson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Andrew, thank you for that report. But what is that? Have you got a list of the level of empty assets that we have got, and what progress is being made to resolve their use, such as granting longer leases via the asset management group to allow these community groups to take on such buildings via the use of external grants. Thank you.
Are you taking each question one at a time? Okay, carry on, Councillor Andrew.
Councillor Robertson, we have actually launched an asset strategy plan. Again, that's something that has is a new way of doing things, and you and I have exchanged emails in the last few days about an organisation that you're involved in, and that will be discussed on Wednesday in terms of taking that forward. In partnership with my colleague, Councillor Perry, we have got the community asset transfer, where we've had great success on one of the projects with transferring Mossley Youth Club to Mossley Big Local, another part of our pledges to help the community in Mossley. In terms of other empty assets, clearly we are in the market for selling some of these assets because they are costing us money, and also making sure that some assets aren't locally listed so that we can put those back to auction. And I think the planning committee made an excellent decision on the former local history centre the other day. Just to touch upon other empty properties, we are trying to tackle the main and the longest empty properties in the borough, and Scrutiny very kindly suggested that we use some of the money from the Section 106 social housing contribution in order to put a programme together to tackle the owners of some of these derelict properties and bring them back into use for housing. You know, we've got hundreds of empty private properties in the borough, some of which are in your ward that you know about very, very well, that we are trying to tackle. But, you know, we've got absent landlords. Some of these properties have been empty for over 10 years, and we're tackling the worst ones, hopefully, with that Section 106 money.
Thank you, Councillor. I now call on Councillor Kizar Hussain.
Thank you.
What's your point of order, please?
Under the rules, this particular item has 5 minutes. We're now into about the 7th or 8th minute. Are you just extending this for your Labour colleagues, or are you sticking to the rules?
I'm sticking to the rules. And next is Councillor Kizar Hussain.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Adrian, for your report. I have read it, and there is good things happening there. So it is our job to scrutinise yourself. So there's a few questions. You touched upon housing that's empty, and there's a plan for that. Walsall Town, as you know, there has been regeneration in certain areas, but there is empty shops still in different locations. What's the plan for that, and what we're doing with that? And have we worked with the landlords, or have we been doing something constructive to get them back? Because there's Bridge Street and there's Park Street and there's a few other places where shops are empty. How are we doing helping people with business tax and helping them with support to get this back into use and support them? Also, my second question is about district centres. I know you touched upon the Willenhall Master Plan. District centres, being a Plec ward councillor, obviously there's issues there with parking, and there's other issues that trade needs support on, and there's similar issues around the borough. What's the plan to help district centres in these locations? And my final question is about social housing, affordable social housing. I know the government's got this big agenda of levelling up and doing this and doing that, but what people really want to see is where people get the right support for affordable housing. And I know there's different projects in the borough, especially in Walsall South. What's the plan in Walsall South for affordable housing? That's my 3 questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hussain. In terms of tackling empty shops in the town centre, clearly the council own a large part of the town centre, thanks to your administration buying the Sadler's Centre. So that is something that we're looking at as part of the Future High Streets Fund and the Towns Fund. And we're looking also at the Station Quarter, where a lot of the Future High Streets Fund will be focused on. The clues in the title, it's the area around the station. We are engaging with businesses in the town centre. We've got an incredible business engagement team actually that do engage. Unfortunately, again, we did have town centre management and district centre management that was incredibly successful, but that was cut. not by our administration. And that was really successful because we knew we had more intel and more information about what was going on in each of these district centres and the town centre. Clearly, a lot of the town centre is owned privately. So in terms of rents and things like that, there's not a lot that the council can do. At district centres, we're doing a lot in the district centres, but I'm sorry to burst your bubble a little bit. Pleck's not a district centre, it's a local centre. I know there's some, that's planning and the planning policy definition. Councillor Perry has exactly the same issue with Pelsall. So we have actually, officers are launching a review of district centres and local centres and how they actually fit into that the overall scheme. But again, it's in terms of that business engagement with some of these local centres. It does need to be improved, and it can be improved, and we'd be happy to do that. I mean, I have to say, when I drive through Pleck, I mean, Pleck is, and I've been doing that quite a bit over the last couple of months. It's quite a vibrant local centre, if I'm honest. In fact, I go as far as to say it's probably a bit more vibrant than some of our district centres in the round, particularly the evening economy. Social and affordable housing. Clearly through the planning process, there are Section 106 agreements, but I think what you've also got to remember as well is that we're not a landlord, so we don't build council housing or anything like that. We work with partners such as Accord Housing, WHG, and others in order to deliver affordable housing, but we've got to deliver the right kind of affordable housing and what's affordable in different areas. In some areas, it's bigger properties, 3-4 bedroom properties for bigger families. In other areas, it's starter homes for younger families and smaller families. And obviously working with a combined authority who have got the single commissioning framework, so any funding that does come from the combined authority is predicated on affordable and social housing as well. But I do think, you know, there needs to be this. We also need, and I'm a big believer in this, we also need to increase the aspiration in this town, in the whole of the borough as well. You know, we need to increase people's ambition and people's aspiration, because if people do well in Walsall, they move, and we've got to stop that because we need that disposable income in our town centres, district centres and local centres.
I'm aware, colleagues, that there are 3 others who wish to ask questions, but unfortunately we're out of time with this particular section of the agenda, so my apologies to you. Can I move?
To elected members. I'll be happy to take the questions in writing and get back to elected members at another time if anybody else got any other questions.
That would be helpful. Would colleagues agree with that? Those who are waiting, I do apologise, but time is time. I do apologise. Thank you very much indeed. I now move on to, thank you anyway, Councillor Andrew and members for the questions that you put. I now call upon Councillor Pedley to present his report, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members, it's been 9 weeks to the night since I was appointed as Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care, and I've spent that time getting to grips with the portfolio, meeting the Directorate and knowing, understanding the priorities facing adult social care and the current work streams. I'm not going to repeat the report verbatim that's in front of you this evening. You've got a comprehensive report, but I'm sure you've all had time to read and digest. I would like to subtract a couple of points from it, Madam Mayor, which is the fact that adult social care in Walsall is faring extremely well, given the current pandemic pressures facing the department. The adult social care has been the front line in some of the COVID response in the borough, working alongside our health and wellbeing board members, our portfolio member for health and wellbeing, and the resilient communities model as well. Making sure that people, the most vulnerable in our society, have been protected throughout these unprecedented times of the COVID-19 response. So we are faring much better than some of our regional and national comparatives. Much of the language the past 12 months has been about resetting and re-envisioning the work of adult social care in light of an already fragile health and social care system. Just picking up a couple of more points in the report, Madam Mayor, that we have continued to engage with all of the providers across the borough throughout the course of the pandemic response. Our providers have excellent business continuity plans in place that has led to the present provision that we have no provider failure from our providers within the sector, which is a testament to our commissioning teams and the collaborative working between our providers, the commissioning teams, the Health and Wellbeing Board, and the wider teams across the council. Just to shape that in terms of the current picture, Madam Mayor, increased demand has led to 250% increase on recent months in medically fit for discharge numbers across the borough, which then has led to a 400% increase in care package demand. It's easy to get lost with figures, percentages and numbers, but behind each of those percentages is an individual that has either been in receipt of care throughout this pandemic, or more importantly, being delivered care by an individual. And recently, together with the chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Board, we have written to all of the providers thanking the workforce for their sterling response in light of the COVID pandemic. It's all very well and good sometimes to criticise, but like I say, there are individuals delivering that care, and we are thankful for that workforce in light of well-documented pressures within the sector. So we'd like to place on record our thanks to each and every one of the 5,000 plus adult social care frontline workers that are out there day in, day out, in the face of adversity faced by the COVID, delivering care, keeping our residents safe. I think I'll pause there, Madam Mayor, and open up for any questions members might have.
Thank you, Councillor Pedley. I now call, I've got so far three people wanting to speak. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Pedley. The report states that over £8 million has been administered as part of the infection prevention control funding. Do you have any examples of how this has been spent?
Councillor Martin, a lovely question. 8.4 million has already been administered throughout the pandemic by the administration, with a further over 2 million to be administered before the end of March. And this has been the frontline response in protecting some of our frontline workers and indeed our individuals in receipt of care. But despite the national media portrayal of healthcare and care home settings being a dangerous place to be throughout the pandemic, we know that this hasn't been the case in Walsall. We've had a fantastic communications team from day one of the pandemic that has engaged with our providers, called all of our care homes on a weekly basis to ensure they have adequate PPE provision and make sure that that 8.4 million has been administered effectively. Some of the examples of that, as I alluded to a little earlier, behind every statistic is an individual, and some of that money went to pay for care workers who proactively chose to remove themselves from their family settings to live in hotel accommodation to be able to continue to provide a safe working environment for the clients and service users they protect. It also ensured that care workers who might have needed to self-isolate during the pandemic received their normal salary, so did not have the fear of losing wages or a reduction in wages through having to self-isolate through COVID-19. So there's lots of different examples of how that's been administered to keep individuals, service users and providers safe. Thank you.
Councillor Gary Flint.
In the report, it stated that adult social care continues to support the broader health systems as part of the Walsall Partnership. Do you have any examples of how this has been achieved? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, the Walsall Together Partnership was first agreed by Cabinet in 2019. And it's just been granted an extension in Cabinet in December to continue the work in there. The aim of the Walsall Together Partnership was to bring together 11 different teams across the council and indeed the wider healthcare setting into a single integrated system that focuses on hospital discharges. As a result of that working, which we have had fantastic feedback from during the recent CQC provider collaboration review in July 2020, as a result of that working, the capacity of the service has increased and indeed doubled. The average length of stay for individuals in hospital post-medically fit for discharge has reduced from 10 days down to 2 to 3 days post-medically fit for discharge, all as a great example of the Walsall Partnership working together. We all know the well-documented reasons and impacts that prolonged stays have in hospitals, and every individual would obviously much prefer to be in their home setting. So to reduce from 10 days to 2 to 3 is a fabulous example of the Walsall Partnership collaborative working.
Thank you. Councillor Core.
Thank you. So I just want to kind of just firstly say thank you very much for a very comprehensive report that you sent through. So sorry, just bear with me a second. Okay, so what I would like to know is with the, sorry, my computer's gone down. Okay, so with the government release on its long-awaited white paper for adult social care, in December, can you just give a brief overview to this and also what sort of steps Walsall is taking ahead of the reforms?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. As we know, adult social care have long awaited the release of the white paper headlining its reforms towards adult social care, and that was released in December, 1st of December. What it does is sets out a vision of reforming, reshaping, reinventing adult social care. The issue with adult social care is it's always historic, the way things were, the way things have always been done. And we all know that just because that's the way things have been done in the past doesn't necessarily mean that's the best way of doing things in today's day and age for the benefit of the individual. The 10-year plan focuses on a vision of choice, control, quality, fairness and accountability. And what the white paper doesn't do is give us instructions, Madam Mayor, of how we deliver these changes, but it gives us a framework to work towards. And with the creative minds that we have and with the administration we have, we can shape adult social care moving forward for the better experience and lived experience and positive outcomes for the residents of Walsall.
Thank you. I've got 3 more people requesting to ask questions. If you can keep your parts, you know, as slim as you can, then we can get the last 3 that I've got to actually be able to get answers. So the next person I've got is Councillor Josh Whitehouse.
Just wanted to ask, in relation to the forthcoming mandatory vaccinations for adult social care and NHS staff, I just wondered if you had an update in terms of the effect that's having in Walsall.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. As we know, regulations have changed and come into force as of April this year that requires all front-facing adult social care staff to be fully vaccinated. The first cohort that meant that staff in care homes needed to be vaccinated came into force in November. That actually resulted in very little of the staff across our providers remaining unvaccinated, and it constitutes 0.6% within the care home. But in the next phase, as I said, we've got just over 5,000 front-facing adult social care staff, and to date, 4,500 have received their first dose, and 4,300 have received their second. So we have got some time to encourage, and I'll use this platform just to encourage those people who haven't yet taken up their vaccine to please do so, to keep themselves and the clients that they support safe.
Councillor Kizza Hussain.
Thank you. Thank you. Welcome to your role, and thank you for your report as well. My questions are two brief ones. One is about the budget. I'm sorry, I'm taking a bit off track here. It's about up 90. You can answer this through email if you haven't got the answer, but I will ask the question. There's a cut there for, and I'm going to read this out. It's a review for older people and existing long-term and new residential nursing and domiciliary placement costs support packages for learning disabilities, including supported living and mental health. There's a cut there for 4.4 million. What will the impact be on the people of Walsall? That's my first question. And my second question is about domiciliary care. There's a huge waiting list for people waiting for care. We've had a report that came to scrutiny recently where it was a constructive meeting. What's the latest update on that? Has the numbers reduced? I know there's a national shortage of carers, and there's issues with Brexit that's sort of stopping people sort of doing this role. So what would you say to that? What, are we reducing the number of people who are filling this role? I know you said that, and the director said that there's a shortage because of people going to different aspirations, different jobs, and not coming to here. What are we doing to sort of reduce this?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Thank you for the questions. I'll take them in the reverse order, if I may. In terms of the outstanding assessments and people are waiting for care packages, as I said earlier on, we have seen an increased demand of up to 400% of individuals requiring a care package. The latest figures are we have 472 outstanding assessments across the borough. And just for reassurance that they are split across the localities of the borough, and each of those assessments are RAG rated in terms of priority. So although the total might seem quite large, 472, given the framed picture of the COVID response and the increased demand we've got, those are RAG rated, and I have short assurance from the Directorate that in our locations we have no more than 12 rated as red, which are being monitored on a weekly and daily basis, ensuring that the package of care is brokered. Yes, we've got staff absences, which is resulting in longer term assessment wait times. And yes, we've got provider provision issues due to the well-documented COVID response. So it is being monitored, it is RAG rated, and individuals are assessed to ensure that needs are met in a timely manner. In terms of budget, it's easy to frame everything as a cut to a service, a cut to a budget. In real terms, adult social care has an overall benefit target of 9.13 million from this administration, which is receiving significant investment of 14.267 million over the year 22-23. So what we frame as cuts, I would say, are we looking at what is working best for individuals? What is the best outcome for an individual? And are we getting value for money in terms of that provision? For one example there, if we assess an individual for daycare provision, and we say the only opportunity you have is to go to this building-based daycare provision to engage in your meaningful activities of your choice, how sad if that was us as an individual, we would be being deprived of the opportunity to interact with the people and places within our communities where we live that can support those needs in an alternative way. I will formulate a formal response in terms of the budget, but I hope that answers the question for now.
Thank you. Final question by Councillor Robertson, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Obviously, COVID has had quite an effect.
I said this is the last question, Councillor Smith. Carry on, Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Obviously, COVID has caused quite a lot of absences. Are we in any risk of not being able to fulfil our obligations in care homes and actually staff visiting homes?
Mayor, I will keep it brief. The short answer, Councillor, is no. We've got no provider failure at the moment. That is a result of our providers having fantastic business continuity plans already in place. Yes, we have got over 60% of our care homes currently closed to either new admissions or visitors as a ring fence and protection due to the ongoing COVID pressures. But at the moment, we have no risk of failure provider within the sector.
Can I thank you all who took part in that? There are two issues that are very, very important to this borough, and I did play some poetic license to some extent, but answers were needed and answers we got. So thank you very much from all parties for taking part in that. They are very important, portfolio holders, and the issues concerning everybody in the borough. Thank you. Move on now to item 12. Notice of motion, the Nationality and Borders Bill. I call upon Councillor Nawaz to move the recommendation, please.
I'll move the motion as set out in the paper.
Second that, Madam Mayor.
It's been moved and seconded. Carry on then, Councillor Nawaz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So this notice of motion brought forward today is to do with the fact that this new law, particularly Section 9 of this law, builds within it a lot of fear for communities in the country and in Walsall as well. It creates fear amongst those people whose heritage can be traced back to other countries, particularly BAME communities, Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities. Many people have contacted us, and some of you may have seen the debate going on nationally about this issue. People are really scared about what this means for them, for their friends and for their families. People are looking at it and are debating this. Many people, particularly in some of our ethnic minority communities, are really upset with the way this law has been brought around. It was amended at the very last moment, and it was only discussed for 9 minutes in Parliament. But this has a fundamental impact on the citizenship of our communities and of our people. We are all here, British citizens. I am as equal to you across there and across here. Yet this law brings with it an inequality that goes to the fundamental nature of what we are as citizens of this nation. The danger in this section is not only what it is looking to do, it's the way it's doing it. Without a hint of notice, without any notice at all, somebody can be picked up and taken away from this country and dropped off in a nation which may be alien to them, only on the basis that they can trace their heritage back to that nation. So, for example, if someone's father was born there or their grandfather was born there, they can be picked up and taken away without any notice. And therefore, without the principle and the fundamental right as British people to defend themselves and to be represented by lawyers to fight that case. That is the danger in it. Without representation, we can be removed from this country. Now, many may say that this doesn't affect everybody, but it does. Because if you treat one citizen unfairly, you're treating all citizens unfairly. We need to understand that if one of us has their rights removed as a citizen of this nation, then all of us should be fearful of that, because that's not what we want to try and achieve. We should be protecting everyone's rights. The unfair treatment of two people perhaps committing the same crime but treated completely differently is something that we should stand up against, and it's something that we should not accept. The record of this government and other governments, I should say, but this government with the Windrush scandal, which is still going on, where people who came to this country when they were basically a few months old are taken away from this country and dropped off in a nation which they don't have any real link with. That has created such mistrust. Then you had the issues of the hostile environment where people were scared. You see, many years ago, we grew up in an environment where people used to say to us, go back to your own country. And we used to say, look, get off. This is our country. We were born here. There's nothing wrong with that. We used to have issues where I remember my father, bless him, used to say to me, son, you should be happy about this, that you're protected here, because one day they may decide to send you home. And I used to have an argument with him and say, that's not going to happen. They can't send us home. We're British citizens. We're born here. We live all our lives here. That cannot happen. Yet this section brings with it the danger of people who were born here, because it refers to the entitlement to citizenship, not that you are a dual citizen, that you could be removed from this country. And that's why it's so dangerous. And in that also, we should be looking at what does it mean to be a citizen of this country? Once you're accepted, once you become a citizen of this country, surely your rights should be as equal as every other citizen. And that's why this notice of motion is brought here. But if you look at some of the reasons that the Home Secretary is giving about why she could remove the citizenship, one of them is otherwise in the public interest. Now, if you look at our great history in this country, no movement has come forward, no changes made without the people who are bringing that change forward, who are seen as a threat to the status quo. When the franchise was increased to working people to vote, they were seen as people being against the status quo and a threat to society. When we had the suffragettes who called on women to vote, they were seen as somebody being radical and against the status quo. When we had issues around equality and that of people's discrimination on the basis of the colour or their sexuality, they were seen as radicals, the people who were fighting against those things. They were seen as people who weren't conducive to the public good. Yet this law brings with it the danger. If one person, the Home Secretary, feels that you aren't conducive to the public good, she can remove you from this country without you being able to have legal representation. And colleagues, the biggest thing here is this law, if it comes forward and if we don't oppose it, we can only oppose it because it's the parliamentarians who will make the decision, but we can show our solidarity with our communities and those that are fearful of this. It undermines the rights of a citizen, and that's what's fundamental about this section. It's undermining the rights of our citizens. Because if one citizen's rights are undermined, every citizen's rights are undermined. Why should we be treated differently? Everyone here has colleagues, everyone has friends, people have family, people certainly have constituents who fit into that box where people are from another country or their parents are from another country, and this law will affect them totally. And that's what the danger is. People who we walk around with, we work with, we have friendships with, are in danger of just being removed at any time. And finally, to end this, showing support with our communities on this for us is fundamental, because there is real fear out there. And if you ask some of your friends and some of your colleagues from BAME communities around this chamber, they'll tell you that people are talking about this in the mosques, in the temples and in our communities. People are really scared of what this law will mean to them. But fundamentally, this law goes against the democratic way of our lives in this country. And it is certainly an un-British law that's being brought forward. And I hope you could support our motion today. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nawaz. Councillor Hussain for seconding, I think, yes?
Secondly, I'd like to say a few words. Thank you. Agreeing with my colleague, Councillor Nawaz, what he said, I'm just going to add a few things on. This is a racist, discriminatory bill targeting BAME communities. Under Clause 9 of the bill, people can be stripped, revoked of their citizenship without any prior notice or warning. This is wholly wrong, shocking, and unacceptable. This totally goes against individual human rights and international human rights laws. The fear, anxiety, stress this is causing BAME communities across the UK also is disgusting, appalling, and needs to be condemned. This will make people second-class citizens. We all know what happened to the winter generation and with the hostile environment. This bill legislation is a total power grab from this Conservative Home Secretary Priti Patel. She should be ashamed of herself for this act, and we should all push her to revoke Clause 9 of this bill. And I ask you to show solidarity to people in this country and people in Warsaw who are really anxious and fearful for what this bill holds. And we should be sending a message collectively today that we are against this Clause 9 of the bill. We are against this for discrimination against BAME communities, and we should show solidarity. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Bird, excuse me, Councillor Mike Bird.
Madam Mayor, I've never heard such a load of rubbish in all my life. I have to say, this law has been in place since 1914. You're too young to remember this, Councillor Hussain, but I understand that this law was used against the Cambridge Five. None of those were Asian. They were all Russian spies. Burgess, Maclean, Philby, who put this country at risk, and their citizenship rightly was removed. I have to say, I see nothing in the bill, and I've read it, that says the BAME community. I think that was an acronym a few weeks ago that you objected to. But now we seem to be able to use that because it suits your cause tonight. I have got an amendment which I circulated in advance, and I'll tell you why. Because this notice of motion represents 10% of the population of Warsaw. 90% of the people in Warsaw are not of the BAME community. Many of them have come to Warsaw, welcomed by Warsaw people from Iraq, Poland, Albania, and other countries that have been under oppression. So would they come here fearing they're going to get ousted? Let me tell you now, in 1974, I was driving around Birmingham when the bombs went off from the Irish community, the IRA, and I saw my friends killed. Would I have stood in the way of having their citizenship stripped of them? No, I damn well wouldn't, because my friends are not here to argue the case for that. But what I come back to is this notice of motion, and I quote the words, someone probably a little cleverer than me, from Stephen Baker, MP, and he said this: with regret, reckless and irresponsible politicians have been telling lies about Clause 9 of the Nationality and Borders Bill. Clause 9 of this bill does not change the basis on which people can be deprived of their citizenship, only how they are given notice. A few weeks ago, at a scrutiny committee, this administration was accused of being not in a way of employing people of all nationalities. We were very narrow. We were not inclusive. This notice of motion is exactly that. It is exclusive to certain communities of the borough. And the reason my amendment, which I've circulated in advance, which I will speak to when I move it, it is true to say this administration believes in equality. It believes in not being divisive. And sadly, I saw the text that was sent out by certain members of the Labour group, a call to arms for the BAME community to come here tonight and demonstrate. Well, as you can see, the gallery's packed. Packed, you can't get in. And that's because it was directed to only one part of the Walsall community. Many of the people will look back and see this law. It's been used 191 times since it was introduced. And I think 121 of those in the 1970s, 41 of those in about 30 years. What does that tell you? It is used in an extreme measure. An extreme measure. We've heard many times. You look at the Lockerbie disaster, a long time ago, but I remember it, when a plane was blown out of the sky. And what happened to that guy? He disappeared out of the country. Luckily, they found him, and he wasn't British. But at the end of the day, this is an extreme measure, as people would say, but in actual fact, it's not. It's an existing law of this land. However, having taken on board what the notice of motion appears to want to say, I worded an amendment to which I would move now, Madam Mayor. I'm not going to read it, but what I have done, I've highlighted the changes in red so that it makes it easier to understand. And I've taken out all but one references to the BAME community because I'm told we can't use that anymore. But under the Constitution, an amendment must be containing the original sentiment of the notice of motion and cannot be a direct negative. But what it also does, he says to the citizens of Warsaw, whatever country you're from, whether you're Polish, Albanian, Iraqi, or anyone else in the world, you're welcome in Warsaw, and we will protect you by fighting for your rights here and now, wherever you come from. You don't have to be Asian, black, or from any minority, ethnic minority. It is important that the message is that this administration and this council is inclusive of all communities, because this notice of motion, in my view, in its form, is divisive. So therefore, I would formally move the amendment as I've circulated, Madam Mayor.
Seconded.
And I sincerely hope that people will contribute to the debate on that amendment, and if approved, would then become the substantive motion.
So your amendment's been moved and seconded. Yeah. Okay, I'll continue now with the people who want to speak. Bear in mind you've got an amendment attached to it now as well. And you will have a right of reply at the end. So, Councillor Nawaz, did you want?
Amendment. I'm speaking on the amendment. Yeah.
Yeah, please do.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I'm speaking to the amendment. Thank you, Mike, in your usual boisterous way about making the points. The issue of BAME communities, and it's not just black and Asian people, it's ethnic minorities. So when you talk about Polish, Iraqis, Kurdish people, Africans, and that, they are included in that. And it's not a divisive motion that we put forward. Looking at your amendment, I mean, I would like to thank you, first of all, for accepting our notice of motion, because the changes you made, apart from the colour of the ink, doesn't really make any difference to the amendment that's to the motion that's been put forward. Indeed, when you talk about
Constitution, if you look, the words dual nationality are included in my notice of motion, which means all people who are not born in this country and have dual nationality.
And if Councillor Baird would let me finish, but no, that's fine, that's fine. There's not much difference to this and our motion, apart from, which is what I was going to say, the addition of dual nationality. But the case with this law is that it's not due to people having dual nationality. It's the intent, not the intention, it's the fact that they are able to be eligible to have dual nationality. So therefore, if I'm not a citizen of any other country, although my parents were born in another country, I'm eligible to seek citizenship of that country. And that's where the danger comes. The other thing about the notice of motion and some of the things that Councillor Baird said to the main motion was the issue about So this has been happening for years. The danger in this is that it's the fact that there's no representation when someone is withdrawn from this country. In other cases, people are able to employ a lawyer and say, right, you know, I disagree with this and I want to go to the law and try and fight it. He allows someone to put their case forward. That's the danger in this law. It's the fact that there's no representation at the point someone is removed from this country. That's fundamentally un-British, and that's the point of the motion that was moved forward. We're happy to accept the amendment because it says exactly the same thing that we're saying. There's no problem in accepting that, and I'd like to thank the opposition for accepting the basis of this motion, which says that this law is wrong, and we should be writing to the Home Minister to ask her to withdraw this section from the law. So I welcome that, and we accept the amendment. Thank you.
So you've accepted the amendment. Thank you. Right, I've got others wanting to speak. Councillor Tuki Samra.
Madam Mayor, what is British citizenship? I ask you. It is a right to live in the UK forever, the right to hold a British passport. British citizenship gives you the right to live and work in the UK permanently, without any immigration restrictions. Full civic rights. This includes the right to vote in elections and the right to stand for public office. Free NHS medical care. The right to habeas corpus. The right to natural justice. Now, what does the new Nationality and Borders Bill mean for the people of the UK and, more importantly, for the residents of Walsall? Under the new proposed legislation, in its current form, if it were to receive the royal assent, the Home Secretary would be able to deprive British people of their citizenship without telling them first. This new law could affect up to 6 million people. This figure of 6 million people includes 400,000 dual nationals born in the UK, and those also eligible for dual citizenship, as well as over 5.2 million people born abroad but have British citizenship, and also, more importantly, their children. These people could be stripped of their citizenship and their right to stay in the country they call home, even if it meant by doing so, they would be rendered stateless. These are not just limited to the BAME community, but also include, but not limited to, people born in Poland, Nigeria, Pakistan, Jamaica, India, South Africa, Kenya, Germany, France, Zimbabwe, Ireland, Italy, Bangladesh, the USA, China, Australia, Hong Kong, Somalia, Turkey, Portugal, Iran, Romania, Spain, Iraq, Canada, Singapore, and many more, Madam Mayor. Now, I don't condone any crime against this state, and anyone who commits such heinous atrocities, whether here or abroad, should be punished and the full force of the legal system thrown at them. However, this bill, under Clause 9, introduces a grey area and gives the Home Secretary the power to remove that citizenship under the guise of public interest. What is public interest? This is very subjective and only belonging to the person who wills it. Leading scholars have dubbed this uncivilized and legally disproportionate. This bill creates a two-tier system because that does not apply to millions of others. Let's take some of our most notorious criminals who've committed some sickening crimes. For example, Ian Huntley, Rosemary West, and the killers of poor 6-year-old Arthur Hughes. Can we take their citizenship as much as we would like to? The answer is no, we cannot. Yet we will be able to take the citizenship of those I have mentioned, those whom have been born here and only know this country as home, if this bill becomes law. If it were to do that, they could be sent to a foreign country that they have never visited and have no association with. countries that have some of the most harsh, strictest penalties in the world. Hanging, stoning to death. So whilst I respect the rationale behind the opposition motion, I cannot support it in its current form because by doing so, I would not be accepting and defending the other Walsall residents that Clause 9 also affects. I therefore call upon members present here tonight to support the amendment to the motion, and by doing so, showing our united support for all the communities that make up a great borough that Clause 9 affects. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. One thing that I do agree with Councillor Nawaz on is that there's very little difference in totality between his notice of motion and Councillor Bird's amendment. What Councillor Bird's amendment does is tidy up the grammar and the English, although there's a couple of words that should have, I think, have had a capital letter rather than a single letter. That's a mistake on both counts. And particularly this difference between BAME and dual nationality. Out of the two, the Conservative amendment makes more sense to me in that sense, in the sense that I've just spoken about. I feel uncomfortable. Now you might say, well, you would do, you're a white man, and I don't even like that term, by the way. I feel uncomfortable with this term BAME community because I've got lots and lots and lots of friends of all different communities, and I haven't heard one ever refer themselves as a member of the BAME community or a member of a BAME community. It's rejected by many people because it tends to kind of tar everybody with the same brush, and it doesn't allow for the individuality of people who might be a Pakistani Muslim or an Arab Muslim or a Irish Catholic or whatever. I don't like the word BAME, I must admit, although that's, that's just an opinion on my part. And my anti-racist credentials are there to see. In the 1970s, late 70s, I took the job on, voluntary job, unpaid, as the secretary of the biggest local organisation in this borough, the Walsall Community Relations Council. In the 70s, I lost a job because I defended a black man while the police were trying to arrest the wrong man. In the 1980s, I lost 2 teeth, being attacked by racist National Front people in the town centre. And in the 90s, myself and 2 other councillors were thrown into a police cell in Green Lane for daring to want to march or walk, protest peacefully up the high street of Bloxwich against the National Front, who the police had walked alongside the week before on the same high street. So my credentials are sound. I've got no guilty conscience there, even though I'm saying what I'm saying now. In terms of this particular act, and Section 9 in particular, I don't know enough about it. I haven't read the act in full, and I'd challenge anyone in this, or ask anyone in this room to say that they have. I've heard what Councillor Hussain, I've heard what Councillor Samra, I've heard what Councillor Bird have said. It does seem incredulous to me if this particular act means what Councillor Hussain and Councillor Nawaz and Councillor Samra think it means. It would be incredulous to think that a government, right, that needs to get into power by votes would pass a law that threatens the citizenship of 6 million or thereabout 7 million citizens. That's incredulous to me. If that's so, then politicians of all sides should be shouting from the rooftops, and I haven't heard it. I haven't heard it. I haven't heard what Keir Starmer's got to say about it. I haven't heard what Boris Johnson's got to say about it. I do know that when it has gone to the vote so far, 2 of our 3 MPs have voted for it. I'm not necessarily against that. I don't know enough about it. If it is what Councillor Hussain and Councillor Nawaz and Councillor Samrafia, then they're right. The trouble is, I don't know whether they're right, because I can't actually believe that a government would pass a law that would put so many people in jeopardy. Now, because I don't know enough about this Section 9, I can't support Section 9, and the implication of not voting for this amendment would be that you're in favour of Section 9, and I certainly am not in favour of Section 9 because I don't know enough about it. What I have heard and what I've read, although there are conflicting reports, I don't like it. But I haven't yet been able to see the difference between opinion, genuine opinion, scaremongering, genuine opinion, one side or the other. I haven't quite worked it out for myself. And therefore, I would have no alternative but to support this particular amendment, because not to would be supporting this Section 9. And if it does mean what some councillors have, you know, with respect and quite genuinely from their point of view, believe it to be, then it's dangerous. So I think we've got no alternative but to support this. I support the amendment, which now everyone's the two main parties have accepted, because it's tidier and I think it's more honest, basically. And I prefer, I like this term dual nationality rather than like the term BAME community. So I will support it, but I must admit, I don't think there's been a big enough debate locally and nationally about it. I certainly haven't had a telephone call from anyone about it. That doesn't mean to say it's not important. Of course it's important. I think we've got a lot to learn about it. I would imagine that most councillors in this room haven't read and understood fully what this bill's all about, and particularly what Section 9 is about. I'm one of them. So I would support this as the amendment stands. But I'll need to do a lot more reading and thinking and listening about what it's really all about, because I can't surely believe that any government, and I'm no supporter of Conservative government, no more than I am of a potential Keir Starmer government. But surely it can't mean what some of the councillors have suggested it means. I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm saying I find it incredulous, if that's the case, that any democratic government could even dream of putting forward a law that could threaten up to 6 or 7 million of our residents. No. I support the amendment.
Councillor Ian Robertson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I mean, certainly I would support the amended resolution. I mean, Amnesty International claims the bill will create significant obstacles and harms to people seeking asylum, and it will undermine the Refugee Council Convention also. It's an attack on refugee rights, criminalising boats rescuing people at sea and violating our 70-year commitment to the Refugee Convention. I think that it will create a two-tier category of British citizenship, and it will apply predominantly to ethnic minorities, may be given just a single letter to the last known address for them to be evicted from Britain. It's a legal assault on international refugee law, and the biggest assault, as the Freedom from Torture organisation has stated. So I believe that this bill will breach both international and domestic law in at least 10 ways, accusing the government of riding roughshod over its obligations. So certainly I would be supporting this notice of motion.
Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Councillor Singh Sohal.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On the Nationality and Border Bill, Section 9, I have seen the fact sheets prepared by Tony Cox and understand it, but there are ramifications of this bill and affects more than 6 million citizens in the UK. I could be affected by this, and many other councillors and other people. I have grave concern that this bill, if it's used inappropriate, could leave people stateless and facing the death penalty in some other countries. We have seen recently the case of West Midlands 3. For those of you don't know, 3 Sikh men from the Midlands were accused of killing a man who was a leader of the right-wing Hindu organization in India. They had been investigated 10 years ago and no evidence was found. The Indian government wanted these 3 extradited and were reinvested again and have been acquitted due to the Indian government fabrication evidence, and those fabrications revealed in the court here in England. Say, for example, these 3 lads had their citizenship removed and their only eligibility for nationality was taken to Indian citizenship based on their fact parents were born there. The penalty they would have faced, the crime they did not commit, would be death. If the government is presented with fabrication evidence by foreign governments and take the wrong step to revoking someone's citizenship, it can have deadly consequences. I implore you to all of you to support this motion by Conservative Group amendment to the item 12 and its ramification affected by more than just Sikhs of India and Muslim of Kashmir. There are ramifications for people from all over. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wahid Rassab.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This particular nationality and border bill is very important. It affects millions of peoples. But I like to ask Tony Cox and the Chief Executive, debating this in this chamber, will this make difference in London? Is that in our remit? We've got more important issues at local level. We should be debating this, but we should be discussing it before we bring this to this chamber. When I read this motion, we had our group meeting on Friday, so hence we had a lengthy discussion. And after lengthy discussion, our group agreed to amended motion. For that, I'd like to thank all the members of the Conservative administration listening to their councillors, Mike Bird, Adrian, Gary, everybody listened to us, and they've amended the motion because they know that's what the residents want to hear. But again, the fundamental, this is my personal belief, I believe the fundamentals of this bill is right. Why? It's because the method is wrong. Our streets are full of drug. Crime is going up and up and again. We got people coming to our great country in a boat. Are they real asylum seekers? Are they real asylum seekers or economic migrants? So we really need to think. And again, why would the government take my nationality away? Why? I will only be worried if I'm a drug dealer, I'm a threat to this country, I'm a criminal. Why would they take my and my children's and my brothers? So we need to, because there are concern in the community and a number of people have contacted us. So therefore, I'll be supporting this amendment tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Rassab. Finally, the last speaker is Councillor Sabina Ditta.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I do welcome the amendment of dual nationality because it does include everybody who is going to be affected by this bill if it does come into law. And I think what has been said and what is worrying is the fact that it is creating a two-tier citizenship here because 2 people could commit the same crime but are we going to be punished in the same way? Whereas none of us in this room condone such atrocities as, for example, terrorism, as mentioned, some of the examples that were given and the reasons why those people's citizenship was taken away from them. But the fact is, it is treating individuals differently. So if I were to commit the crime, I would be sent back to the country I was born in, which is Pakistan. But at the same time, I'm just going to use an example, anyone else in this who is not considered a dual national but commits the same crime will not be treated the same. Yes, there should be harsh punishments for those who commit such crimes, but I don't think this is one of them. And we're talking about how it wouldn't affect us, Councillor Assab, because, you know, I'm not a criminal. I shouldn't worry, right? But the worry here is the fact that it states it's up to the Secretary of State if she feels this person is conducive to society, and that's subject to interpretation, her interpretation. And like Councillor Sahal gave a very good example there, what about if that evidence is fabricated? How do we know that was actual evidence? Because that person will not have a right to a trial in this country. It will be up to the Secretary of State, who right now, the current Secretary of State, I don't think she's going to sympathise with me. And for me to be sent to a country where, you know, there won't be a fair trial will be seen very unfair. And I think that's what the issue is here. Councillor Smith, you think that the government will be worried if, and they would never allow something like this to happen because this will affect 6 million people and they wouldn't do this. Shall we go back in history? Would the people in Germany ever have woken up to realize that because they were Jewish, they no longer are considered Germans and that they are going to be put to death for being Jewish? Because they considered themselves to be German, many of them. Or shall I go back to those who were killed in Bosnia because they were Muslims? They consider themselves to be Bosnian just as much as I consider myself to be British. Although I was born in Pakistan, I came into this country when I was 2.5 years old. I consider myself to be British because I've spent all my life here. But there is that fear now that I could be stripped of my citizenship on the basis I've been accused of something that there may not be enough evidence of. And we have seen this happen to people. So it is something to worry about. And I do hope that people around this chamber do support this amendment as I do. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I believe the amendment was accepted by the movers, was it not? So therefore we're moving to the vote now. All those in favour, please show. Any against? It's carried unanimously. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to hand over to Tony Cox. He needs to make an announcement.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to confirm that the amended motion has been carried unanimously, which means that now becomes the substantive motion. So I'll read out what the substantive motion before the council is now. It is Section 9 of the Nationality and Borders Bill, currently being debated through Parliament by the Conservative government, has created anxiety, alarm and real fear amongst the people of Walsall, including those from a BAME, Black, Asian and minority ethnic heritage, and others with dual nationality. Many have contacted their local councillors and fear what this will mean to them. This council, taking note of the concerns of these communities in Walsall, expresses its opposition to Section 9 of this bill, asks for this section to be completely removed from the bill, stands with our dual nationality communities, British citizens who are scared of being removed from the United Kingdom without notice, the right of appeal or the right of legal representation, and instructs the leader of the council and the leader of the opposition to jointly write to the relevant minister, informing him/her of our borough's opposition to this section of the bill. That is now the substantive motion before the meeting, and to confirm, as was said earlier, in light of the fact that this is now the substantive motion, the right of reply to the originating motion no longer exists. Thank you.
Councillor Bird, you got your light on.
Into the substantive motion, Madam Mayor, can I just read something which will probably educate the gentleman and lady over there, ladies over there? The deprivation of British nationality, Immigration Act and Asylum Act came into effect in 2002. Note, a Labour government. And where British nationals could be deprived of their citizenship if and only if the Secretary of State was satisfied they were responsible for acts seriously prejudicial to the vital interests of the United Kingdom or an overseas territory. In 2006, under the Labour government, this was extended under the Immigration, Asylum and Nationality Act. People with dual nationality who are British nationals can be deprived of their British citizenship if the Secretary of State is satisfied that deprivation is conducive to the public good. The very words in this bill. There is a right of appeal. The provision has been enforced since the 16th of June 2006, when the Immigration, Nationality and Asylum Act Order 2006 brought into force. Loss of British nationality in this way applies also to dual nationals who are British by birth. The Secretary of State may not deprive a person of British nationality unless obtained by means of fraud, false representation or concealment of a material fact if they are satisfied the order will make a person stateless. So on both occasions, Madam Mayor, it is the Labour government that brought in legislation to withdraw British citizenship, and yet now we have a Labour group saying it wasn't a good idea. Maybe you should have told your leader of the day. The other thing is, which I have to point out, since 2010 to 2018, there have only been an average of 19 people having had their citizenship removed. I'm sure many of us could probably name those. And who would say that they shouldn't have had? Let that man or woman stand up and say, oh no, we shouldn't have done that, because they were a threat either to national security or indeed were convicted of acts of terrorism. It clearly states in the Act the reasons for that being taken away have not changed. It's only the notice which is given by the Secretary of State and only by her at this point in time. Could be a man in the future, who knows? But at the end of the day, I come back to the points that were made by that very MP who clearly said it is reckless and wrong to tell lies about the Act when in actual fact nothing has changed since the Labour government introduced it in 2002.
Thank you, Councillor Bird. I think we've had a vote already on it, and my understanding is that the vote was on the motion as amended and accepted by all sides.
Exactly what the minutes will reflect, I'm sure. When the amendment is agreed, it then becomes a substantive motion of which I've just spoken to.
Well, we'll move to another vote on the substantive motion then. It was your motion originally. Go on.
Yeah, sorry. Just the one point to say, Mike's right in what he says about these were the laws that came in at that time. The difference is that at this point, this law coming in is stopping people to have a legal representation to fight.
On a point of order, Chair.
I did hear you, but I was talking. Go on.
On a point of order, Councillor Bird has now summed up the substantive motion, and it should now go to the vote without any further comment by any of the councillor. If Councillor Navas is allowed to speak, then I reserve the right to be allowed to speak as well.
Carry on, Councillor Navas.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So the point here is, it's the way this is being done, that a person can have their citizenship removed without them being able to go to a lawyer or to get some representation. That's the danger in this. By the time it's happened and you've been dropped off in another country, you've got no So you want me to? Yeah, you have no representation, and that's the danger in this law, not the fact that it's not being able to remove someone's citizenship. It's the fact that they don't have legal representation at the point of being removed. We all deserve to put our case forward. Every citizen deserves to put their case forward and make the point why they feel that the Home Secretary is wrong. That's just natural justice, and that's what this motion was about in the first place. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, colleagues, I believe we've had a vote. You accepted the amendment put forward, so it became a substantive motion. And that was, I believe, that's what we voted on, and that was unanimous. We now have to vote on the substantive motion. My apologies then. All those in favour of the substantive motion, please show. Any against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Can I move on to the agenda item 13? And it's the notice of motion again. Councillor Nawaz, I believe, to move.
I'd like to move the notice of motion as set out in the papers.
I'll second that, Madam Mayor.
On a lighter note, thank you for that, Madam Mayor. It's sometimes these debates can be really quite involved, and I'd like to thank everybody who took part in that first debate, because it has emotion in it. This one does have emotion in it as well. People contacted me originally as a ward councillor when they were getting tickets for driving through Wolverhampton Street. And at that time, I thought it was a one-off, but I was getting quite a lot of calls from there. When I looked into it, I found that the fact that so many people were getting caught was a concern. And then the newspapers got hold of it, and we had this statistics come out there that 24,000 people, I think, got a ticket, or 24 or 25,000 tickets were issued. And it is my concern, and the group agrees, that this was a bad idea at the time. So many people getting caught out, in my view, was a trap. And we as a council accepted every appeal that came to us to say that this is unfair and we want our money back. We gave the people their money back. We asked in this notice of motion that we relook at this with a consideration of removing this bus gate. We try and do more to get the public on board on this, and we also try and give the money back to the people who've been fined. It's only the fair thing to do, in my opinion, and this motion sets that out. Thank you.
Councillor Hussain, you're seconding, I believe, yes?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just going to say a few words echoing my colleagues' comments. I think it's a very bad thought out proposal. This was what should have happened was that if they was going to do it, they should have done some proper education and consultation with people. That might have happened, but I can't recall it. And what's happened now is that over 25,000 people have been fined for going in this bus trap lane. And they were, I think, wrongfully fined. And I've been contacted by a number of people from my ward and where I live, and they feel this is unjust, unfair, and they should be reimbursed. I think we have reimbursed many people, and there's still outstanding cases that we haven't reimbursed. I've had 2 that's come through my inbox in the last week, and I think we should look at this proportionately. And I think the whole logic was that we wanted more footfall in this area and around our vicinity. I think it's really backfired really badly. I think it should be rethought, rethinked, and we should compensate the people who have been fined and whose appeals haven't been successful, and we should be consistent with that. And I think we should go back to the drawing blocks. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Adrian Andrew.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And sadly, again, the party opposite are behind the ball again. The review of this bus gate, this bus line, has already been put in place back in December. I had some conversations with a number of businesses and that, and we've already started the review of this particular bus gate. It's not a permanent one. it was put in place as an operational matter as part of the short-term measures to facilitate operation of the town centre during the COVID pandemic. But more strategically, this particular TRO, Traffic Regulation Order, was part of the town centre master plan that everybody's bought into at the moment. I would absolutely agree that when this was installed, there wasn't enough signage, and that has been rectified. And in terms of trying to, and I can understand the sentiment because we asked the question as well about refunding everybody. It wouldn't be possible to refund everybody who's done the PCNs. Many PCNs were paid with cash or as a pay point. PCNs issued against lease cars are often paid for by the hire company and recharged to the driver. And it's not possible to refund payments to expired debit cards. Of the 25,000 PCNs, not 25,000 people, 25,000 PCNs, because actually, I mean, if we've got 25,000 people coming through the town, we're doing pretty well in terms of the economy. Only 6% have been appealed. So only 6% of that 25,000 have been appealed. And I think, as you say, most of the appeals have been, particularly before all the signage was improved, most of the appeals are actually being agreed to. But we won't be bounced into removing it. We're not going to be bounced into anything in the town centre from a notice of motion. The review has already started. That will take its process. So we will not be supporting this notice of motion this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Bird.
I wasn't going to speak on this, but I think that Councillor Hussain needs to apologise for his comments, saying that they've been wrongfully fined. It makes it look as if this council have done something illegal. That is not true. This was a traffic regulation order that was put in place by this council, and if a driver has violated that traffic regulation and a fine was issued, then in actual fact that is right and proper. And to say that they were wrongfully fined, I hope he'll consider what I've said and withdraw those comments. The breach of the law is clear. The traffic regulation is a law. And at the end of the day, whilst I agree, my colleague Councillor Andrew and I, that the signage was inadequate at the beginning, I reported that to our Senior Highways Officer, Katie Morton, an exceptional officer, I would say, and immediately it was addressed and put right. Since then, there has been quite a lot of leniency attached to this, but I could give you an example of a lady who came to my office and said, I've got this fine for going through the bus gate. Oh, dear me. Well, at that point in time, it wasn't very adequately. Oh, thanks very much. She appealed and it was withdrawn. She then came with another 4. And so my PA said, look to the lady, stop going in the bus lane. You've had your fine, you've had it repealed, if that's the word, but you've been there another 4 times. Stop doing it. And sadly, there are people who've had more than one. If there's anybody in this room apart from one I know, then if you have had a fine, you better declare an interest now. Because if this notice of motion were to be supported, you would gain financially and therefore would be in breach of the regulations controlled by this council. So I will pause there and let you reflect. If you have had a fine from there, get up and declare an interest, because the law is quite clear. As soon as you know that you have an interest to declare, even if it's part way through the debate, you declare that interest. So I'll leave that on the table for you to think about. It's funny, really, but, you know, I go back to Birmingham. Sadly, I have to. And they introduced a clean air zone. And there were thousands of people over there that had a fine for going through the clean air zone. And so, like us, they adopted leniency for a period of time. I have to say that if you go in the bus gate, after all the publicity it's had, I question whether you should be driving at all. Because it might very well be that your eyesight requirements are somewhat short. And as a result, my advice to you is don't go down the bus lane. This is an operational matter. And I have to say to you, if you, as individuals and elected members here, were to support this notice of motion tonight, then you'd all become highways officers. Tomorrow, because the bins weren't emptied, we'll have another notice of motion and we'll all become bin operatives. Council officers are paid to do the job that we set out in the policies that we put down. And one of those policies is we put in traffic regulation orders. Some of them have been in existence for 30 or 40 years. And if you violate those traffic regulation orders, it's only the same as having double yellow lines. If they're there, you can see them. If they're not done correctly, then any fine that's imposed can be appealed. So I implore you tonight, first of all, think upon what I've said. If you have had a ticket, I suggest you declare an interest, because there are those that might just turn around and say, oh, that person didn't declare an interest. I found out now. I think we'll report them to the Standards Committee. Well, I know I've been there many times. As you haven't heard, I've got my own filing cabinet. But at the end of the day, these are the nuances that are within the Constitution and within your job as an elected member, where you can fall down a hole, not even knowing it's there. Because as you know, the hole's in the road, the officers are looking into it. But I say to you tonight, do not meddle with operational matters. Leave it to the portfolio holder in conjunction with the officers who get paid to do their job.
Councillor Richard Worrell.
Well, I live local to that part of town, so I'm very, very familiar. I had one case of a constituent who said, I don't mind paying the fine, but I really didn't find that the signage was adequate. I went and had a look, and even with the improvements, I don't think it's actually brilliant. And the idea that if you go past Green Lane, your only way is to loop round multi-print round a sort of semi-pedestrianised Shore Street to escape the bus-only route. It doesn't seem too clever to me. This particular guy, well, I don't know what's happened, and it's not up to me to determine that. He did appeal, and he will get an outcome. What he said was, well, you know, this was a completely innocent thing. I didn't see the signage. I agree the signage didn't look to be very clever to me, not at all clear. But he said, if I have to, I'll pay the fine. Fair dues. I think what I'd also like to say was I described that situation, having had a look in some detail in an email to Katie Morton, and fair dues, she came straight back with a very detailed reply. So, Councillor Andrew, if you hadn't had sight of that already, I'm happy to forward that to you because it may be helpful. I do welcome the idea of or the proposal to do a review, and you know, whatever comes out of that, if it's for the best of the whole community, then that's got to be an improvement. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Now move to the vote. You want to write a reply?
Just to say, I'd welcome the portfolio holder telling us that it's being reviewed and that this is a temporary measure. That's very good. That will please a lot of people. But I do feel that we should be able to find a way of reimbursing those people who got trapped, in my view, to pay that money. So I still maintain that we should give the money back to those people who got fined, in my view, unnecessarily and unfairly. Thank you. But legally, I accept that.
Thank you. Can we now show of hands? All those in favour of the motion, please show. All those against? I think the motion's lost. Move on now. Agenda item 14, notice of motion, PLEC by-election costs. Councillor Bird.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I won't mess about. I'll move the resolution as set out.
Seconded.
And to be fair, I have to say, I've never been in a position where we are looking stupid, to say the least. We have a by-election that wasn't needed. The calling notice was sent by the honourable member from Walsall South. In case she doesn't like me saying that, I have the email here. Yes, it was in accordance with the electoral law. The two people could call a by-election. Why would you have a by-election a few weeks before the election was due to be held for the gentleman who sadly passed away? What a damn waste of time. A damn waste of time, money, effort, and indeed misleading the people of the Pleck ward, thinking that they go out and cast their vote and they're going to get somebody elected to represent them. Well, didn't happen, did it? Because the candidate wasn't valid. And I've been reliably informed that because that candidate was an employee of this council, that was the first of a criminal offence. Now, it is a fact that we had advice that we should pursue that. Of course, we wouldn't. We saw this lady, as it was, very sadly, was ill-informed by, in my view, the National Labour Party. And I take the blame away from the colleagues over here from the Labour group, because it was me that told Councillor Aftab Nawaz the election had been called. He didn't know anything about it. It's a good way to run your case, isn't it? Good way to run your shop. By the way, did you know there's an election being called? He said, where? I said, Pleck. Who's done that? Don't ask me. We haven't done it. So he then went away to find out. It then, of course, puts our officers in a very difficult position, because I was aware that the candidate worked for the council. And again, I rang Aftab, I said, she works for the council. No, he said, I've checked that. She's resigned. And I said, well, I don't think so. And to be fair, I have no axe to grind against Councillor Aftab Nawaz. Let me make that quite clear publicly, because he, as I said, didn't know about it. Not only that, the young lady didn't know either that she couldn't stand because she was an employee. It was said to me that she had resigned verbally. Of course, then you get the situation. Is she still an employee? She's got to work a notice. Well, I asked that question, and I have to say, took the Fifth Amendment, because they're not allowed to get involved with things of this nature. I wasn't allowed to find out whether she still worked here, because that's an HR matter and it's confidential. But I have to say, I take pride of our officers. Tony Cox is in the room, and all the Democratic Service and the Chief Executive said to me, sorry, we can't help you. So, on to our campaign manager, who rings the electoral registration office and said, here, this is what's happened in Walsall. What do you think about that? Oh, I don't know. He said, well, as an employee of the council, she can't stand. I'll have to go and check that, was the answer he got. And I thought, well, he too and I were both flabbergasted. The Electoral Commission didn't know if you're an employee of the council, you couldn't stand for election. So we all go out there in the wind and the rain and all the rubbish and litter that unfortunately exists in the Pleck. I had my eyes opened. I've seen more bins open in the Pleck than I've seen at the waste transfer station in Aldridge. And I went out on a Sunday afternoon to see a gentleman's concern. My colleague, Councillor Wahid Rasab, came with me. And I was absolutely shocked to find that the pavement that goes over the bridge, all of the lights are out. And they haven't been on for years. So I said, what have your local councils done about it? Nothing. Nothing. The lights are still off. So I then raised that, as I would, not because there's any votes for me in the Pleck. I have trouble getting the votes where I am. But at the end of the day, I then went and found out there was a dispute between British Rail, the Highways Authority, and us. We're looking to take control. Did you know the bridge, by the way? You're the Pleck councillor, Councillor Hussain. Oh, he's not listening. Never mind. He hasn't been listening for years. That's why the lights are out. The fact of the matter is this, the bridge that goes over, I said to this guy, I said, on Sunday afternoon, I saw all the bloody lights are on. Well, I was looking at the lamppost, wasn't I? No. The walkway, which is about as wide as this, when you get through the faeces and the drug paraphernalia, and you then sweep away the rubbish, and you look at the graffiti, and some of the spelling's not very good, let me tell you. And it was like 4:30 in the afternoon, and it was bloody dark. So then I realised what he was telling me. The lights are above this walkway. And if I was a resident of the Plec and I said, I wouldn't want to walk down there, whether I was male or female, it was scary. I was lucky I had Wahid with me because he's bigger than me. And I thought, if anybody picks on me, I'm going to say it's his fault. But coming back to reality, what a travesty. What a waste of money. What a waste of our officers' time. What a waste of the electoral process. And you say to me, we've got to encourage people to vote. Well, you tell me one reason why the people of Plec should go out and vote again. Because it was appalling. They were all dragged out, all 900 of them, I think. Every one of them cast their vote. But misleading the electorate is something you should take very seriously. Because you ask them, they lend you your vote from one election to another. And if you don't do the job, you have the right to be kicked out. Well, I have to tell you, the only thing it did for me in the Plec was to see that what we need as a council is Operation Plec. Operation Plec. This gentleman told me, his words, not mine, that approximately 80% of the rented houses in the Plec are from Eastern Europeans. Now, I've got nothing against Eastern Europeans, but one thing we've got to do is educate all of those residents of what recycling is about, what waste collection is about, and what fly tipping is about. Because that's what I saw in the Plec. And I have to say, I was appalled. I was appalled to think that representing this council, things were so bad in that area. So can I just put a plea down that Operation Plec will be our pledge after the election to make sure that that does not exist, not only in the Plec, but anywhere in Warsaw. It was disgraceful what I saw there. And it didn't come from clouds in the sky. It came from the people who live there or visit there or dump their stuff there. And quite honestly, that is not acceptable. But coming back to the costs, we hear all the time about the cuts that we're having to make and the savings we're having to make. Well, there's 20 odd grand there that somebody should be paying back into the coffers of this council, and that is the National Labour Party. And I sincerely hope this council will agree that our officers write a letter at this council's instruction to say, we want our bloody money back, and the cheque's in the post.
Councillor Nawaz.
Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Bird, entertaining as always. The election process, as you said, was correctly called. Two individuals from the Plec ward went and called the election. The candidate we chose was a good candidate, a decent candidate, and in a decency, as soon as she realised she wasn't legible, she put her hands up and made everybody aware that she wouldn't be accepting the councillorship if she was elected. Indeed, before the postal votes landed on people's front doors, they knew that if they voted for her, she wouldn't accept the councillorship. Before they went to the ballot box, they knew, because of all the press that was around, that she wouldn't be accepting the councillorship. So the people of Plec had a chance to choose between a Conservative or nothing, and they chose nothing. They chose not to be represented rather than be represented by a Conservative. That was their choice. But you are right. The Plec branch Labour Party wasn't aware of this election being called. They weren't informed and they weren't notified of it. They weren't consulted. The Warsaw South CLP, they weren't informed and they weren't notified or consulted. The Labour group was not informed or consulted. The West Midlands Regional Party wasn't informed or consulted, nor was the National Party. There was 2 individuals who called the election and they called it correctly without any consultation with us. That isn't good, and we weren't happy about it. And I've gone on the record saying that. But it is what it is. We're happy for us to move to the vote. We're not going to win it, but we will move to the vote.
Councillor. Councillor Kisa Hussain, you got your light on?
Yeah, I've got my light on. Thank you. Thank you, Adrian. You was before me, but I don't mind. As you got the reply back then. Yeah, basically, I agree with Councillor Nawaz. I welcome Mike's pledge about Operation Plague. I think we'd like that to happen all the time, not just after this by-election. We always want Operation Plague consistently around the clock and all the time. But I welcome Mike's comment about that Plague will be a priority. Regarding this notice of motion, Councillor Nawaz is right. I, as a local councillor, didn't know about it. I, as a CLP chair, didn't know about it. I wasn't consulted. There was 2 individuals from PLEC who went to the elections office and filled a form in and called this election. It wasn't wanted. We didn't call it. If we called it, we could have done it from the day 1 when Harbans passed away. We had the time to do it, but we had no intention to do it. Our intention was to wait till May when the local election would happen and have the election then. But these 2 individuals went on their own back for whatever reason, and you should write to them, Mike, and ask for the money from them, because these 2 people are responsible. And it's not. I really feel sorry for the candidate here. The reason being here, she, in good faith, in good intention, filled forms in to stand as a councillor. Nobody is an expert in code of conduct or the description, and she wasn't well informed about this. And I think it was a genuine mistake from her that procedure wasn't followed. And she has accepted that, and she has said that publicly and in the press. Saying all this, as Councillor Nawaz said, we didn't do any leaflets, we didn't do any messaging, we didn't do any Facebook posts. The Conservative had an open goal to win this election. They did a lot of work there. They did a lot of door knocking, a lot of canvassing, but the people of Pleck Ward didn't want a Conservative councillor, so they voted for nothing, where the legibility issue was there. So I congratulate Pleck Ward residents for not choosing a Conservative councillor there, and I'll look forward to working with the resident of Pleck Ward and getting Pleck representation in the future. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Adrian Andrew.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can we be clear that we're not questioning the democratic process? We all, all of us were aware that you, as a Labour group, weren't going to call the by-election. It's, Pleck's not been a Conservative seat for quite some time, although it was twice, in fact. The people of Pleck voted for a Conservative councillor, and it's probably gone downhill since those Conservative councillors left. Yeah. So we all agreed that locally we wouldn't be calling this by-election, not because we don't believe in democracy, but Pleck has still got 2 councillors. It wasn't going to change the control of the council. It wasn't going to have any impact on the government. But it was called by what we understand are 2 Labour Party members in the ward. And I think that's one of the things as well. From my understanding, and I think this is where this falls down on the incompetency side, you don't have to live in the Pleck ward to call the by-election in Pleck, from my understanding, because the 2 vacancies that were in Pelsall in May of this year, Councillor Bird and I called those vacancies. And I have to say, There's been a lot of comments about the candidate. I personally, I don't think the candidate bears that much responsibility, because from what I understand, she was a young woman who's been around a while in Willenhall South as an activist, and really should have been advised and should have been told by more experienced people than her. Politics 101, selection 101. Do you work for the council still? Because it was all over Facebook in the past that she worked in the libraries and all the rest of it. It wasn't rocket science. It was pure incompetence on the people who did the selections. And again, our understanding is the selections weren't done locally. It is a bit of a worry that we've got a Labour Party that are trying to run this council. God forbid they're trying to run the country, but you can't run a bloody election. So I think the fact remains is an election was called for the democratic process, but that vacancy was not filled. Pleck still only has 2 councillors, and it cost the taxpayers of this borough over £20,000 to keep just 2 councillors. So I think I would be urging people to support this notice of motion, because, as Councillor Nawaz said earlier about all these people who've been captured by the bus gate, the people of Walsall need to be reimbursed, and need to be reimbursed by the Labour Party. And I would hope that people will support this notice of motion.
Councillor Smith.
The wise people in that by-election were the 90% who didn't vote. The angry people ought to be the 10% who did vote. Now, I'm not fully in lines with Councillor Bird and Councillor Andrew on this one, in this sense. The law, and we were talking about the law last time about the traffic item, the item before, the law says that within this particular period of time, 2 members of the borough who are on the register can call a by-election when there's a vacancy. Quite rightly, as was said, they don't have to live in that particular ward. So I would defend that law and that rule that allows 2 people, when they're in order to do so, to call a by-election. What is indefensible is the fact that a major, arguably the biggest or the second biggest party in the country, the opposition in this council and the government, the Labour Party, shows such incompetence as to allow this to happen. Now, as I understand it, well, as I've just listened, it seems that some of the Labour councillors who have spoken are kind of pushing the blame on this inexperienced candidate, and she's apologising and she was in the wrong, but blah, 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 blah. I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, when you fill in your nomination papers to stand for the council, if you're going to stand for a political party, you need the signature of the party's nominating officer. Please correct me if I'm wrong. Without which, no candidate could stand and put the word Labour Party candidate or Conservative next to their name. So I find it amazing that people are saying that the Labour Party didn't know what was happening. Who was the Labour Party's nominating officer that signed to allow their particular candidate to call themselves a Labour candidate? So whilst I think that the Labour Party show utter incompetence and almost indirectly contempt for the people of Pleck, I would defend the right of any 2 people, so long as it's the law, to call a by-election if they wish to. Now, that's the rule. I'm sorry that sometimes democracy costs money, and, you know, OK, it costs £20,000. It's only been a wasteful £20,000 because of the incompetence of the Labour Party, but democracy does cost money, and the law allows 2 individuals to call a by-election. And I think if people don't like that, they need to get the law changed so that 2 people can't call a by-election. So whilst I can't support the notice of motion that's been put down by Councillor Bird, can I say that if I was in Councillor Bird's shoes, I'd be moving something very, very similar. I'm not in his shoes. I do think the Labour Party has shown incompetence. I don't think the blame should be totally put on the shoulders of the candidate, however young or inexperienced she was. She was the Labour Party candidate, and therefore the blame rests with the Labour Party. But I wouldn't go as far as to say, because I don't know who the two people are who legally call the by-election, I wouldn't go as far as to say, therefore the Labour Party ought to pay the bill. So I won't be voting for the notice of motion, but I think the Labour Party has shown utter incompetence.
There are no further speakers. So, do you want to write? I thought you would.
Mayor, I thank you for that. At no time are we criticising the democratic process, and Councillor Pete Smith is right. My colleague, Councillor Andrew, made that clear. And at no time are we blaming the candidate. I make that clear publicly. The problem lies with the incompetence of the Labour Party, either nationally or wherever it was done. I know it wasn't done locally. I'm pleased to hear that Councillor Kissa Hussain is Operation Plec 365 days of the year. But let me tell you now, my experience is your clock stopped. Because when I went in the Plec, I have to tell you, and everyone sitting around here that did the work in the Plec, if I was a Labour councillor in the Plec, I'd hang my head in shame.
Now move to the vote. All those in favour of the motion before you, please show. Can somebody count? Is it necessary? I don't think it's necessary. All those against? The motion is carried. The motion is carried. That concludes the meeting, colleagues. May I take the opportunity to thank any member of the public that may have been watching on YouTube. Can I ask the clerk to confirm that the live stream has stopped, please? Thank you all. I declare the meeting closed.